gentlemen, good morning or afternoon.
Can you hear us?
How's it going?
Oh,
Can you hear me?
Better.
Dissecting
Okay, good.
what the Canucks broke to. Yes. Can you hear us?
Yeah, unfortunately.
Are we live?
We're live.
Good start.
Killing it. I'm untethered without my guy Jamie Dodd. Gentlemen, there's a lot to unpack from last night. I want to start with the game.
Yep.
We'll move on to Arshdeep Bains, and then we'll get into what it means and what comes next for the Canucks. So let's begin with the game itself. Classic sports talk radio thing. Out of 10, where's your level of concern for this team, given that they've just dropped 3 in a row for the first time this season?
Everybody that we've had on, and I think when I hear Rick talk last night, this is in line with this. That 5-on-5, and you heard what JT Miller had to say even after the Minnesota game, that they're, I'm not going to say fine with things because they've lost 3 games in a row, but I don't think they're as concerned, the Canucks, as everybody else is. Look, you got to put up 2 points. I get that, but I would agree. Even that Minnesota game, it was so weird. It was a throwaway game.
Yeah.
5-on-5, even last night, I'm okay with it. Three game losing streaks are going to happen. This one just happens to happen in mid-February, where everybody gets a little bit more concerned.
What team doesn't go through this, Thomas? After the Canucks won in Boston, the Bruins lost 4 straight. I think the Avalanche lost 4 straight going into last night. Every single team over the course of a season is going to have ups and downs, peaks and valleys. My biggest concern right now is the power play. I mean, it's a 1-goal game with 6 minutes left last night, and that power play did nothing. Like, we were talking about this during the show. They're 1 for 24 with the man advantage. And, 2 shots in 4 minutes on the power play last night. And the one late in the third really hurts. You're down by a goal. You got this golden opportunity. I don't think they had a shot on net on that power play. You've got so much skill out there. You got guys in the top 10 scoring. And this power play right now is they're not getting shots through. They're not getting in on the inside, Thomas. And this power play needs some help ASAP.
4 minutes of work for the Canucks power play, 5 shot attempts, 2 shots on goal. Since the All-Star break, gentlemen, it's not even just that the power play is not scoring, it's surrendering goals. The Canucks power play in 9 games since the All-Star break, 3 goals for, 3 goals against. 0. That's net 0 from the power play. I think you saw a template last night, too, of why this team is going to need their power play to be a difference maker in a tight checking game, which that surely was.
Yeah, and you tell me, Thomas, when you watch this team now on the power play, and look, the talent's there. I think we can all agree on that. When you watch this team on the power play, does there seem to be as much movement and creativity as there was earlier on? I don't think there is. And, it just seems like such a simple thing. You'd think they'd try to get back to that. That's what I would be looking for if I was them. But that's a good stat about the shorthanded goals against. That's not great. I suggested earlier on, and I know this is way out there, but I always loved when the Boston Bruins, when they had Zdeno Chara, when their power play wasn't going well, just to wake everybody up, they'd put him in front of the net. Yeah. And maybe I know this is way out there. I know it's a bit old school. Put Zadorov or put Myers out there. Put Dakota Joshua out there in front of the net. That big body screening the goaltender. Just something different to mix things up, to wake everybody up. I know it's a short-term solution. I get that. But just something. Maybe that gets everybody going.
Thomas, maybe get Tim Kerr out of retirement.
That's all he talked about today was Tim Kerr.
Thomas, do you not know Tim Kerr?
No, Tim Kerr's before my time.
Oh my God! Oh my! How old are you?
What?
You don't know Tim Kerr?
No, I never saw him play. I can't
21?
Dude, guy's 64. He retired in 1993 when I was 5 years old.
I know, but he was the power play. He was the power play king of all time, Tim Kerr.
If he'd been the power play,
your radio station is all 21 years old. But come on, Thomas.
If he'd been the power play king 2 years later, you know what I mean? I would have known who he was. But
Donnie,
5 years old, I wasn't a big enough hockey nerd then.
Well, big red-headed player from the Flyers, and then eventually the Rangers 50-goal scorer.
Yep.
Lindros was there. There was a lot. Well, even before Lindros, actually.
Before Lindros.
But they compared him to Phil Esposito. Do you remember Phil Esposito?
Yes.
I shouldn't assume you know Phil Esposito.
No, Phil Esposito's a big enough character in hockey history that I know Phil.
In the slot.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. He's done other things other than play, but immovable in the slot, had hands.
Oh, deflections. All his goals were deflections. He was a merchant. What do the kids call it? A merchant on the power play now.
A power play merchant?
That's what the kids call it.
That's what the one spitting chicklets guy calls it, Rick.
I don't know one kid, and I've got three of them who says that.
These guys call it a merchant. But anyways, Tim Kerr, there's the update, Thomas. Thomas,
I love the idea.
You born in like 2000?
I was born in 1987. Close. I like the idea that Rick's like walking into a BCL. What? I like the idea that you're like walking into a BCL, Rick, and 87. I was born in 1987. But I like the idea that Rick's walking into the BCL and there's some kids outside of the BCL trying to get him to buy them liquor, and they're like, "Come on, what are you, a power play merchant?" And he's like, "All the kids are saying that." Can we talk some Arshdeep Bains?
Anyways,
Tim Kerr asked me to buy him something at one point.
What number was Tim Kerr done?
12.
24?
12.
12. Yeah, 12. Good player.
Oh boy. Arshdeep Bains, I need to get your reaction to it. It would have been a great story if he hadn't performed so well, but he really did perform well. Rick, what was your reaction to Arshdeep Bains' first NHL game?
What I really liked is that Bains started the game on a line with Bluger and Garland. Tocchet showed a lot of confidence in him, but he stayed on that line. Thomas, you know how many guys get called up, and by the second period, they're on the fourth line? You know, they get dropped. This kid stayed on that line the entire game. And remember, he had no practice. Like, he never got practice with Bluger and Garland. He just got thrown into the wolves, as they say. I thought he was physical. He didn't get rattled with the big moment. Had some good plays offensively, set up Bluger twice. Work ethic was strong. But how about giving some credit to the Abbotsford coaches? You know, part of their job is to prepare these kids to play in the National Hockey League. And the fact that he didn't seem rattled by the moment, that tells me he's pretty good coaching down in Abbotsford. So I thought it was a positive night for him for sure.
Yeah, close to 4 minutes in the third period and getting more ice time than his line mate, Connor Garland, Mikheyev, Amon. That was impressive.
PDG, yeah.
But, and having his father in attendance, Kuldeep was just so special as part of the Canucks mentors trip. But Thomas, take if you can his South Asian heritage out of the equation for just a second here. Just it would be a great story, even if he wasn't of that heritage. In that he wasn't drafted into the Western Hockey League. He wasn't part of the Bantam draft. Was passed over there. He was passed over in the NHL draft. He led the Western Hockey League in points, but you remember the story. He was 20 years old at the time. He's dominating kids, big deal. But there just seems to be all these obstacles in front of him, and he's knocked them all down. And that was just a really special day. And like Rick said, how many times have we seen players? You know, the coach will throw them some breadcrumbs, start them, put them in the starting lineup. And then they go downhill from there. And that wasn't the case last night. And he had that opportunity on the 2-on-1. He probably should have shot there.
Yep.
You know, he's 2-on-1 with Brock Besser, Canucks leading goal scorer. You knew he was going to try to pass, but he had the wherewithal to have things mess up there and still tip the shot on goal. So there was a whole lot there. And the other thing, as I ramble on here, and I apologize for that, but there's nothing wrong with intercompetition.
Yep.
And to have him come up and push some guys, and Lafferty was up in the box last night. There's nothing wrong with that. The good teams have push from within, have intercompetition. It was great.
And Thomas, let me get this in. Canucks are going to need Bains and others from Abbotsford to play next year because they cannot re-sign all their UFAs. They are going to need at least 2 to 3 kids to crack that lineup next year. And if he can do it this year, that'll set him up nicely for next year. And the next guy that needs to do what he's doing is Podkolzin. He's got to come up, Thomas, I think, and he's got to be that guy. If Podkolzin and Bains can be in the Vancouver lineup next year on opening night, that'll be a big thing for them.
Be a huge help. Yeah, I was impressed with the defensive details on this young gentleman's game, given that it was his NHL debut. You could see the work rate. He seems to understand Rick Tocchet hockey right from the jump. That's a good sign for him maybe continuing to get some opportunities here. And you're right. That's a lot of credit should go to Ryan Johnson, Jeremy Colleton, and the staff down in Abbotsford. All right, let's Rick, I got to ask. Given how few minutes the likes of Mikheyev and Philip DiGiuseppe and even Garland played in the third period last night, given the injury to Joshua, given that Pius Suter and Niels Höglander have been drafted up to the top 6, feels like the potential need for Phil Kessel is more robust today than it was when he was first spotted at YVR with his Vegas Golden Knights. Bag, what are you hearing? What's coming next for the Canucks with Kessel?
Okay, Thomas, the Canucks are going to continue to work out Kessel this week, evaluate, this whole week. By the end of the week, hopefully. This was always going to be, Thomas, something that took time. They were never going to bring him here after 2 skates and make a decision. He has got to pass checkpoints on and off the ice, practice, train, skate. The goal is for him to be NHL game ready. Being told he's on the right track. Testing has been positive. Last time I checked in. No games with Abbotsford Canucks this week, Thomas. They're not there yet. They're not there yet to put him in a game. But all I've been told is they're going to continue to work him out this week. He's got to pass those checkpoints. And then hopefully by the end of the week, we know more.
Rick, I've been watching this recent slump. I'm not going to call it a skid or anything. It's not that dramatic yet. But I've been watching this recent slump, especially the club's struggles defending the rush, although they were much better last night. Killing penalties. They didn't allow a goal against, but I thought the Avs power play was able to pressure them at will. And I've sort of wondered to myself, does this recent run of form in any way change or alter the equation from the Canucks' end in terms of their pursuit or their potential pursuit of Chris Tanev?
Oh, they love Tanev. You heard Besser last week, right?
Yeah.
On a podcast, raving about Tanev, calling him like a father figure. He was so, I said earlier this year that Quinn Hughes, is the biggest Chris Tanev fan. I'm starting to find out it wasn't just Hughes. There's others in that dressing room that absolutely love Chris Tanev, especially from that year in the bubble when he took that young core and. On and off the ice, he's such an absolute great pro. They would, of course, love to land Tanev, Thomas, but if the Flames are holding out for a first-round pick, I said that right after the Lindholm trade, and they continue to hold out for a first-round pick. I don't think the Canucks can do that. The preference is not to trade a first-round pick. That's the preference, but you made a good point. What's going on here? The trade deadline's 2.5 weeks away. Are they going to get antsy and maybe trade a first? The preference is not to. They love Tanev. We all know that, the whole organization. But right now it's a stiff price. I don't know if they can do it.
But it's interesting that they seem to be pleased 5-on-5 at this point. Hey, look, if this continues and it ends up being a 5, 6, 7 game losing streak.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah,
absolutely. Right now I think they're thinking this, that, and as we talked about earlier, this stuff's going to happen. You're going to lose 3 games in a row. To go through an entire season without losing 3 games in a row would be absolutely remarkable. 5-on-5, they've been pretty good. And again, that Minnesota game was just so strange. You throw it away. But if it continues, I think the acquisition of anyone within reason is possible.
And Thomas, quickly on Tanev. The biggest concern right now is a lot of Western Conference power teams are in on Tanev.
Yeah.
Like Colorado is in there, Dallas is in there, Edmonton's in there. So the Canucks really don't want to see that guy end up on a pretty good team in the Western Conference, right? That's another issue that's going on right now with Tanev.
Yeah, especially Edmonton in my mind, because that team is an upgrade on second pair RHD. They get an upgrade at second pair right-handed defense. That is a scary prospect for the rest of the West.
Yeah, that's a concern for the Canucks right now.
The other reason that I was thinking about it last night was that first period, right? You see Noah Juulsen, I don't know if it was a slash or if he took a shot in the hand, but you could see that he was bracing his stick a little bit oddly in that first period and struggling on the bench. Still earned the clear, which was absolute warrior stuff from Juulsen, especially on the heels of a couple tough games. So I love to see that. But makes me a little nervous when there's another defensive injury. And then you see Zadorov obviously get cut. When he came back, stride was a little bit short for a few shifts. I wondered if the Avs would try to take him out wide a bit, but he settled in. It seemed like by the end he was unencumbered. But nonetheless, I mean, Soucy's already hurt. You know, last night it feels like this team's... Yeah, Abbotsford's no Willan and no Hirose. I mean, so many D are hurt down there. These options get pretty interesting if you lose another guy, much less two guys in a period, which, you know, whether it was Myers, Soucy in Montreal or what we saw last night, it's always a looming possibility here. Defensive depth. Do you think that's a priority ahead of March 8, Rick?
100%. They're calling on defensemen right now. Thomas, you always want to be 7-8 deep in the playoffs, right? Because you know injuries are going to hit. You definitely can bank on them looking for D right now for sure.
Well, and also, Thomas, I know we'll go back here to the days of Tim Kerr, but maybe even a little bit before that. But 82, the Canucks had, remember Kevin McCarthy?
Oh, yeah.
Kevin McCarthy gets injured. They brought in Neil Bellin and Andy Schliebner.
Yeah.
Okay, and then they make their way to the Stanley Cup final.
Yeah.
94, Dana Merzen got hurt. They had Brian Glynn from Calgary. They acquired him for defensive depth, and he ended up playing a whole lot of games in 94. People forget about that. And the player that we're talking about a lot here, who wore number 18 back in 2011, was Chris Tanev.
Yeah.
Who ended up being important to them. Keith Ballard couldn't play. They tried, and in the postseason, and he was a disappointment that season. Chris Tanev comes in, undrafted free agent.
That's right.
Out of college. And he fits in just fine. He was signed for, I don't even think he was signed for depth. They thought he was something for the future. He ended up being a great depth piece. This has precedent there here. And I know they just got Zadorov, but Pat Quinn, I remember him always saying, as we go back in the past again, remember him always saying you can't have enough defensive depth at the most important time of year. So from that point of view, nothing would surprise me.
Yep.
Can we, I just want to take this opportunity to remember one of the great lines in the history of Canucks reporting, which was Tony Gallagher's column for the Vancouver Province the day after the Kevin McCarthy injury. I'm going to read it to you. I pulled it up while you were speaking because it's so good.
Okay.
Captain Kevin McCarthy was the Canucks' John F. Kennedy, Gallagher wrote. He was a leader, Catholic, and everyone remembers where they were when he went down.
There's only one person who could write that and get away with it. Tony Gallagher.
Tony Gallagher.
Oh, man. McCarthy, of course, was the captain at the time, right? And ended up losing the captaincy because of the run that Stan Smeal handed the C, put the Canucks on. And, of course, when the club returned the next season, Smeal remained.
How do you remember that?
Yeah.
And you don't remember
I know
Tim Kerr.
I would remember Tim Kerr if he'd played for the Canucks. I know my Canucks history. Anyway,
that's not
played
true.
against them.
Yes, it is. Because I'm telling you something.
Kerr? He didn't play for the Canucks.
Well, because you guys were alive then. But McCarthy and Smeal were roommates when the Canucks decided to replace McCarthy with Smeal as captain, making for some awkward situations. If you talk to Steamer about it, he'll tell you he picked up a lot of tabs that first half of the season before McCarthy was dealt.
I don't remember it being as controversial as Messier-Linden.
Yeah.
But different times, the media was a little more overwhelming, 94 or probably mid-90s when Messier was there versus 82. But, yeah, it must have been uncomfortable.
I think it was awkward. Unlike our annual or our weekly hits, gentlemen, which are always a blast. Thanks for doing this. I'm going to read up on Tim Kerr.
Yeah, you do that. You do that.
Hey, they might be annual after this hit.
Thanks, boys. Be well.
Okay.
Adios.
Beautiful.